I was rinsing out a coffee mug when my phone buzzed. At first, I thought it was another spam alert, some random promo or newsletter I never signed up for. But then I saw the name on the screen, and my stomach dropped. Dr. Harold Lynn, my old university mentor. I hadn't spoken to him in years, not since everything fell apart. I hesitated, fingers cold against the ceramic handle. Why would he message me now? The message had no greeting, no context. Just one chilling sentence. Camille, I'm so sorry about what I saw today, then a video attachment. My chest tightened as I pressed play. The screen lit up with the image of a church. It took only a second for me to recognize it, St. Germain's Cathedral in downtown Austin. The place where my parents dragged me to every Sunday when I was a kid. Christmas concerts, choir rehearsals, charity drives, it was all there. But this wasn't a wedding or a fundraiser. It was a funeral. Rows of guests, all dressed in black. Organ music humming somberly in the background. The camera zoomed in on the altar, and that's when I saw them. My parents. My mother stood at the podium, draped in a black veil and a string of pearls, dabbing her eyes with a tissue like she was in a soap opera. My father beside her, stiff and straight, reading from a folded paper with a cracked voice. Behind them was a casket, and next to it, my photo, my face, blown up in a gold-trimmed frame surrounded by lilies and white roses. I froze. No, 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 no. My father's voice echoed through the phone's speakers. She was a brilliant, if troubled soul. We did everything we could, and though she left us too soon, we know she's in a better place now. My knees buckled. I gripped the edge of the kitchen counter, barely able to stay upright. What the hell was this? Was this some sick joke? I paused the video, rewound it, played it again. Same fake tears. Same carefully measured tone. Same air of rehearsed grief. They were mourning me. They were burying me. But I was very much alive, standing barefoot in my Barcelona apartment, breathing, shaking. The mug slipped from my hand and shattered on the tiled floor. I stared at the screen, unable to move, unable to breathe. This couldn't be real. They knew I was alive. They had to. I hadn't spoken to them in years, not since they disowned me and left me with nothing. But declaring me dead? Holding a funeral? Why? I tapped play again, unable to stop myself. Watching, hoping it would make sense. But it only got worse. My mother spoke next. Her accident was a tragedy. We never imagined we'd lose her like that. Overseas, so far from home. What accident? There was no accident. I'd never been hospitalized, never even missed a day of work since moving to Spain. Then my father added, her final years were hard. She was isolated, alone. But we never stopped loving her. My hand covered my mouth. They weren't just pretending I was dead. They'd built a story, a car crash, a life of isolation. A closed casket funeral in another country. Friends, family, even former colleagues, all nodding along in the pews, believing it. I was being erased in real time. I let the video finish, the camera panned to the crowd. A sea of black suits and bowed heads, familiar faces, former neighbors, my high school chemistry teacher, the barista from the cafe my mom used to frequent, all of them mourning me, and not one, had called to ask if it was true. I sat on the kitchen floor, glass shards all around me, the phone still glowing in my hand. They didn't just cut me off, they buried me, alive. And as the final image faded, my photo beside the casket framed like a trophy, something inside me shifted. This wasn't a mistake, it was a choice. And if they wanted me dead that badly, they were about to learn just how alive I really was. It didn't always feel like betrayal. Not at first. There was a time when I thought my family was built on love, loyalty, and shared dreams. I was the first to go to college, the first to get a PhD, the first to be offered a research position at the same biotech lab my father helped found. They were proud. Or at least, they pretended to be. But that illusion shattered 4 years ago. The day they made me disappear. It started with a missing report, a discrepancy in the clinical data for a gene therapy trial we were running. Someone had tampered with the numbers, replaced real patient outcomes with fabricated success rates. It was dangerous, illegal, and it could have cost lives. I found the falsified entries buried in a subfolder on the lab's secure server. And when I brought it to my father, his face didn't register surprise, only fear. 2 days later, I was called into a board meeting. Cold faces, legal jargon, accusations. They said I had manipulated the results, that I was trying to sabotage the company. I remember sitting there, stunned, while Nolan, my older brother, sat silently at the end of the table, not defending me, not denying the claims, just watching. They had already decided. That night, my father cornered me in the lab. "You embarrassed us, Camille. The board wants blood. Better you than your brother. Better me." The next morning, my keycard was deactivated, my laptop gone, my company email deleted. They didn't just fire me, they exiled me. Within days, OCBGEs, my name was wiped from the project registry. I tried calling my mom, hoping at least she'd listen. She answered, only to say 5 words before hanging up. "You are no longer ours." I stood outside my apartment in Austin with 2 suitcases and no idea what to do next. I was blacklisted from every lab in the city. Friends stopped replying. Even my former professors distanced themselves. So I left. I cashed out what little I had and bought a one-way ticket to Barcelona. Took a job as a barista to pay rent. Lived small. Quiet. I changed my number. Deleted my social accounts. For months, I didn't exist online. I thought maybe, just maybe, distance would help me heal. But even oceans couldn't protect me from what they did next. Last year, I tried logging into my old university email, the one I'd used to store research contacts and grant records. It wouldn't go through. When I contacted tech support, they gave me the reason. Account has been deactivated per formal notification of user decease. User decease. I laughed out loud. Then I froze. This wasn't some glitch. This wasn't a prank. They had reported me dead, formally, legally. My name was marked in multiple systems as deceased, not missing, not inactive, dead. That explained why no one returned my calls. Why no grant foundations responded to my proposals. Why every attempt I made to reclaim my identity online was met with silence. They didn't just ruin my career, they erased me. I remember sitting in the middle of my apartment floor, clutching the edge of my desk like it was the only thing holding me to the earth. My heart thudded so hard it echoed in my ears. I wasn't just disowned. I had been buried, on paper, in databases, across every system that once recognized me. And I had let it happen. I'd spent so long hiding, hoping the storm would pass, that I didn't see them turning the world against me. Until now, until that video, until I saw my own funeral. Suddenly, it all clicked. They didn't want to silence me. They needed me gone. They couldn't risk me resurfacing and asking questions about the lab data, about the IPO, about Nolan's sudden rise in the biotech world. And now I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't about grief. It wasn't even about family shame. It was about covering up a crime. I got up, pulled out the old folder I kept hidden under my mattress, the one with my immigration documents, my rent contracts, flight records, and passport renewals. Proof I'd been alive this whole time. And I made a vow, right there under the soft hum of the refrigerator light. They wanted a ghost? They were about to get one, but not the kind that disappears. The kind that comes back to destroy the living. I barely slept that night. The video kept playing on a loop in my mind. My father's hollow voice, my mother's staged sobs, the crowd of mourners who once knew me, claimed to love me. Now all perfectly content to bury me without a single question. I needed answers, real ones. So I did what any person haunted by their own funeral might do. I started digging. The first call I made was to my Aunt Claire, my mom's older sister, the only one in the family who ever dared to defy the rules, who used to sneak me cookies during holidays when my mother insisted I was watching my figure. She answered after 2 rings. "Hello? Aunt Claire? It's me, Camille." There was a sharp inhale, then, click, blocked. I stared at the screen, cold rage creeping up my spine. Next, I tried my cousin Ava. We used to share playlists and cry over boy bands together when we were 12. I typed, "Ava, it's Camille. Please, I need to talk to you." The reply came 30 seconds later. Just a single emoji, no follow-up, no words. I tried another cousin, Josh. He replied, "Is this some sick joke? Camille's dead." I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears. I wanted to scream, to shake someone and demand they see the truth. But I had no stage, no audience, until I messaged Leo, my youngest cousin, only 17 now, with an overactive brain and a kind heart. As a child, he had trouble speaking in groups, but always opened up when it was just the two of us. I texted him, holding my breath. "Leo, it's Camille. I need your help." He didn't reply for hours, but when he finally did, it wasn't disbelief. It was hesitation. "Camille? Are you really alive?" I nearly cried. "Yes, please. I need to know what they told everyone." The typing bubble appeared, disappeared, came back. "They said you died in Portugal, car crash. You were on some work trip. Said the body couldn't be flown back, cremated abroad." I stared at the screen. Portugal? I've never been to Portugal in my life. "Who said that?" "Your mom, your dad, Nolan too. There was even a news article shared at the time, but it disappeared later. They told everyone it was a private tragedy." Private, my ass. It was a lie wrapped in grief, sealed with forged paper, and whispered into the ears of everyone I once trusted. I needed confirmation. I logged into the Texas Department of Public Health website and searched the death registry. I typed, Camille Rivera. Date of death, July 14th. Cause? Automobile accident in Lisbon, Portugal. Status? Deceased certificate, ID, TX9882, LISB. There it was, black and white, official, forged. They made me dead, on paper, in data, in the legal system. They built a coffin out of lies and buried me inside it. But why? What did they gain by killing me off? I copied the certificate ID and went straight to the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office registry. Something had been bothering me since I saw Nolan speaking at the funeral. Not just the performance, but his rising status. He was never the brains. I was. I searched my name and gasped. No results. Then I searched Nolan's. Pages of entries. And among them, my old research project, the same one I'd pioneered for years, the same one he mocked me for obsessing over. Patent granted. Filed 7 months after my death. Credited solely to Nolan Rivera. I didn't just vanish, I was replaced. He stole my work. Filed it as his. And with me declared legally dead, there was no one left to contest it. Unless... I checked the family's corporate trust records next, the ones tied to our biotech company. A separate fund had been set up when I turned 18. My name, my stake, my inheritance. Something my grandparents insisted on before they passed. I searched the public filings. 6 months after my death, the stake was transferred to Nolan. Done quietly, legally, because the owner, me, was no longer living. That was it. That was the motive. They hadn't just disowned me. They'd murdered me on paper to steal everything I'd ever built. My life, my legacy, my future. My fingers trembled as I grabbed a notepad and began to sketch the timeline. May. I was still living abroad. July. Death certificate filed. September. Patent transfer complete. October. Family stake reassigned. Now, Nolan is being honored at the Memorial Science Gala this weekend. They buried me so he could rise. Well, if they wanted to use my funeral as a launch pad, I was about to turn it into a landing crash. By the time the sun came up, I had a war map. Documents, dates, transfers. Proof. What started as grief had calcified into something colder, something more dangerous. Clarity. They didn't just get rid of me to save face. They buried me because I stood in the way of their fortune. Nolan didn't just want credit. He wanted control. And to do that, I had to vanish. Dead people don't sue. Dead people don't claim patents. Dead people don't speak at board meetings. He took everything. My 40% stake in Rivera Biotech, my name off the research filings, my identity, reputation, and future, and turned it into his empire. He didn't mourn me. He monetized me. And the worst part? He was thriving. The more I searched, the more nauseous I became. News articles sang his praises. Nolan Rivera, the young visionary behind a revolutionary cancer breakthrough. Tragedy to triumph. How losing his sister inspired a medical marvel. He was giving keynote speeches about me, about my work, as if my death had somehow unlocked his genius. I even found a recorded interview where he wiped a fake tear and said, "Camille was brilliant. Her passion drove everything I do now. I wish she could see what we've done." He had no shame. None. And my parents? They didn't just let it happen. They helped him do it. My death certificate was notarized in Texas. The witness signatures? My father's college friend, a notary. The attending physician listed? A fake name. A ghost? Probably some forgotten pseudonym from a medical intern days. The entire thing was built on a lie so complex, so rehearsed, it made me wonder how long they'd been planning it. I sat back on my couch, the city of Barcelona still quiet outside my window, and stared at the mess in front of me, a stack of pages that used to be my life. And I realized something. They weren't afraid of me dying. They were terrified of me surviving. Because survival meant exposure. If I'd stayed in the States, if I'd fought back 4 years ago, if I hadn't boarded that plane in silence and grief, I would have stopped them. I would have ruined Nolan's golden boy image. I would have uncovered the fraud. But now I was a ghost with nothing left to lose, and that made me deadly. Then my phone buzzed. It was a message from Leo. "Camille, did you hear? They're giving Nolan the Caldwell Award at the Memorial Gala this Sunday, downtown Austin, same day as your funeral memorial." I blinked. They weren't just holding a memorial for me. They were pairing it with a press event. They were going to celebrate my death, market it, use it as branding. I clenched my jaw so hard I heard it crack. The gall, the absolute gall to stand on a stage built on my ashes and smile for cameras. I opened my closet, pulled out the one black dress I owned, simple, sleek, sharp like a blade. Bought years ago for a conference I never got to attend. It would do just fine. I pulled out my passport, laid out my immigration documents, collected my apartment lease contracts, tax filings, health insurance, flight records, receipts, dated photos, everything that proved I had lived, breathed, and worked for the last 4 years. Then I started making calls. The first was to an international attorney based in Madrid. He sounded skeptical at first, until I told him I was legally dead and had the forged certificate in front of me. The silence on his end was satisfying. "You're challenging your own death?" he finally asked. "No," I said. "I'm exposing their crime. Do you have documentation?" "A folder thicker than a Bible." He asked for digital copies. I sent everything. Then I said, "I need to be legally resurrected, fast, because I have a public funeral to attend." His voice changed. He knew this wasn't just a legal dispute. This was going to be a reckoning. Before we ended the call, he said something I won't forget. "If even half of this is true, Camille, you're about to become the most talked about woman in biotech." I hung up and stared out at the dawn. They thought they were safe because I was dead. But I wasn't just alive. I was ready. I had 5 days until the memorial. 5 days to turn their fantasy, a funeral built on lies, into their worst nightmare. I started by scanning every document in my folder, line by line. Every visa stamp, every signed lease, every paycheck and utility bill with my name on it. Everything dated, official, indisputable. Then I created 2 folders. New, one for my lawyer, hard proof of life after death. No, one for the media, for when it was time to burn the stage down. My attorney moved fast, faster than I expected. Apparently, I'm alive and my family forged my death certificate, moves paperwork to the top of the stack. He filed a motion to revoke the declaration of death, citing fraudulent documentation, identity theft, and obstruction. We were told it would take weeks to clear fully, but I didn't need the courts. Not yet. I just needed the truth to land first. The real opportunity wasn't legal, it was public. Because while my funeral was being staged at St. Germain's, Nolan was headlining the Memorial Science Gala 3 blocks away, surrounded by press, colleagues, investors, donors, people who didn't know they were shaking hands with a thief. The symbolism made me want to laugh. My fake funeral and his real award, death and glory. But I was going to flip that script. This time, the dead girl walks in. I didn't sleep much, just prepped. Leo, bless his anxious teenage heart, sent me everything he could find. Eyes. Screenshots of Nolan's social media, the gala's itinerary, the guest list from a leaked PR doc. Then one night, Leo texted me. They're unveiling a new research initiative, something big. Everyone will be there. Do they know you're talking to me? I asked. No, I'm pretending I'm on a Minecraft ban. Smart kid. The next day, I bought my plane ticket. Barcelona to Austin. Direct. 1 seat, no return. I stared at the booking confirmation like it might disappear. Like some ghost protocol would cancel it. But it didn't. The real world was finally catching up. 2 days before the event, I walked into the Texas State Registrar's office in downtown Austin, in person. I had my documents in hand. The clerk behind the glass window glanced at me, confused. Hi, I said calmly. I'm here to challenge my own death. That got her attention. In 30 minutes, my lawyer and I were sitting across from 2 department officials, laying everything out. They paled as they flipped through the evidence. Passport stamps after the date of death, active employment history, medical checkups in Spain, proof of life in every legal form that mattered. The final piece? The death certificate itself, forged, stamped, and signed by a doctor who doesn't exist. This is serious fraud, one official muttered. My lawyer didn't blink. And it's just the beginning. They filed a formal review, launched an internal investigation. But again, I wasn't waiting on paperwork. I was done waiting. The night before the memorial, I sat alone in my hotel room, staring at the city skyline through the window. Austin looked the same, but I didn't. Not anymore. The last time I was here, I was Camille Rivera, daughter, sister, scientist. Now? I was a ghost with a mission. I pulled out the black dress again, laid it across the bed. Then I added one thing, a slim folder tucked neatly into my clutch, labeled, The Truth. Inside, the patent Nolan stole. My signed originals. A copy of the falsified death certificate. Transfer records from the company. A note at the front that read, Let the dead speak. At 9:02 a.m., I received a text from an unknown number. Just one line. The memorial begins at noon. St. Germain's. No name, no ID. But I knew who sent it. Someone inside. Someone who wanted me to show up. I stood by the hotel window for a long moment, watching the morning light rise over the city that had once buried me. This was it, my resurrection. Not in court, not on paper. In person. They thought silence would keep me away. They thought erasing me would make me disappear. But they forgot one thing. The dead don't stay buried when they still have something to say. St. Germain's had never looked so full. The street was lined with cars, like a parade of grief. Guests in black spilled out of the church steps, clutching tissues, whispering softly as they made their way through the old oak doors. From across the street, I watched them. Unseen, uninvited, undead. I wore a long black coat, sunglasses, hair pulled into a neat twist. My heels clicked on the pavement as I approached the sidewalk, a shadow among mourners. It felt surreal, like watching a documentary about someone who looked like me but wasn't. A scripted tragedy. Inside, the air was thick with candle smoke and floral arrangements. The organ played a slow, mournful hymn. White lilies lined the aisle. My portrait, that same smiling photo from my university ID, stood on an easel beside a polished mahogany casket. There was no body inside. There never was. At the front, my mother sat center aisle, shoulders draped in lace, a black handkerchief pressed to her mouth. Her sobs were delicate, rhythmic, practiced. My father sat beside her, face stone cold, like grief was a business transaction. And Nolan, golden, perfect Nolan, stood at the podium, hand resting lightly on the microphone, eyes glassy with well-timed tears. Camille was complicated, but she was brilliant. She saw the world in formulas, in problems waiting to be solved. Even in her darkest moments, she believed in possibility. A murmur of approval rolled through the pews. He continued, "She inspired everything I've built. And though she's gone, her legacy lives on. Through me, through Rivera Biotech, through the breakthroughs we've made possible in her honor." He raised a wine glass. "To my sister, the fire in our bloodline." Applause, tears, a standing ovation for a death well scripted. And that's when the priest spoke. "Let us now stand for a moment of silence as we say goodbye to Camille Rivera." Everyone rose, heads bowed, hands folded, eyes closed, and I opened the doors. The sound was sharp. Two thick oak doors groaning open like a vault splitting down the middle. Light poured in from behind me, slicing through the shadows like a judgment. I stepped forward. Each heel on the marble floor rang out like a gunshot. Click, click, click. First, a gasp, then a ripple of voices. A child whispered, "Mom, isn't that her?" I removed my sunglasses slowly, letting them all see me, alive, real, unapologetic. My mother's face drained of color, her lips trembled. Her body collapsed back into the pew in a feint so dramatic I almost applauded. My father's hand jerked. The wine glass he held slipped from his fingers and shattered against the marble. Nolan locked eyes with me and froze. His jaw tightened. His hands gripped the edges of the podium like a man watching his empire tilt. For a moment, no one moved. I kept walking, past the aisle of stunned faces, past the whispers and silent horror, and up to the altar where my casket, sat empty. I turned to face the crowd, dead silent. I smiled. Then I said it. "I heard I died. I'm here to correct the story." Phones rose in shaking hands. A red recording dot blinked in the back pew. Perfect. There was no car crash in Portugal, no tragedy on some distant road. The only accident here is the lie. I pulled the black folder from my coat and held it up. Inside this file, every passport stamp, every signed lease, every medical record that proves I've been alive for the last 4 years. While you mourn me, I was living. Gasps. A few stepped back. "The woman you buried never died. You just needed her gone." I turned toward my parents. "You faked a death certificate. You sold a story to friends, neighbors, colleagues, and when the world believed I was dead, you gave everything to him." My gaze landed on Nolan. "My trust, my patents, my company." He opened his mouth. I raised my hand. "Don't. Not here, not in front of all these people you lied to." A murmur grew behind me. "She's got evidence," someone whispered. "Is that her?" another said. "She's not dead?" A man in a suit stepped forward. One of the biotech investors. I recognized his face from old press photos. He looked at Nolan, then at me. "What the hell is going on?" More phones lifted, more whispers. And Nolan, perfect, charming Nolan, finally cracked. "This is insane," he barked. "She's unwell. This is delusional." "Delusional?" I snapped. "You mean forging documents? Erasing your sister for profit? That kind of delusion?" His voice choked in his throat. I stepped closer. "You wanted a eulogy, Nolan? Here it is. You buried me to take what wasn't yours, but the dead don't stay buried." I turned to the audience one last time, my voice steady, calm. "You didn't lose a daughter. You threw her away. And now, she's back." Then I stepped down from the altar, leaving the silence cracked wide open behind me. I could feel the air shift behind me as I walked back down the aisle. People turned to follow, stunned. Some sat down heavily, others still stood, frozen, like they were watching a ghost testify at her own murder trial. Good. Let them feel it. I stopped halfway down the aisle, turned, and opened the folder in my hand. You all heard their story, I said. Now it's time for mine. I held up the first document, a copy of my passport. Renewed 6 months after the date listed on my death certificate. I flipped to the next. Here's my apartment lease in Barcelona. Utilities, medical checkups, tax filings, pay stubs. Each one a nail in their coffin. I wasn't just alive. I was working, paying rent, buying groceries. While they were grieving, I was surviving. Alone. Erased. The audience stirred, some in disbelief, others in fury. A woman near the front, my godmother, I think, had tears in her eyes. Real ones. I pulled out the forged death certificate next. This? It's a lie. Signed by a doctor who doesn't exist. Witnessed by a man who conveniently happens to be my father's college roommate. Gasps. They built a funeral, not to mourn me, but to bury the truth. And then I turned to Nolan. That cancer research breakthrough, the one you said I inspired, that was my trial, my data, my formulas. I held up 2 patent records, one with my name, one with his. He filed mine under his name, 6 months after my so-called death. Phones rose higher now. Someone started live streaming. I didn't care. Let the world see it. I walked slowly toward Nolan, each step measured. You stole everything, my equity in the company, my share of the family trust, my legacy. He shook his head. You're sick, he said quietly. You faked your own disappearance. We didn't know where you went. You forged my death. We thought you were suicidal. That you left to disappear. Don't you dare, I snapped, voice rising. You didn't lose me. You eliminated me. More murmurs behind us, and then I said the one thing that cut through every whisper. They didn't mourn me. They cashed in on me. I turned toward my parents. My mother wouldn't meet my eyes. She sat trembling, her lace tissue clutched tight like a lifeline. My father looked like stone, not in grief, but in guilt. You didn't just betray me, I said softly. You sold me. Then I stepped aside and let the room see the proof, the legal transfer of my stake in Rivera Biotech. Signed, stamped, executed, just weeks after I was declared dead. That trust, the one my grandparents left me, it was moved to Nolan's account, quietly, legally, because I no longer existed. I turned back to the crowd. This wasn't a tragedy, it was a heist. Silence. And then, a phone camera light blinked red, then another. A reporter in the back row stood up, notebook in hand. Miss Rivera, are you pressing charges? I nodded. Yes, for fraud, identity theft, corporate theft, forgery, and emotional abuse. Another question shouted from the side. Do you have legal representation? I do. And a court date. A third voice, almost reverent. Why come here? Why not go straight to the media? I turned slowly, gaze sweeping the altar, the candles, the empty casket. Because they chose this stage to bury me. I chose it to rise. The audience murmured louder now, a swell of disbelief, outrage, realization. Nolan tried to speak again, but the noise drowned him out. He turned to my father for support, but my father didn't move. My mother finally stood, shaking, and whispered to him, It's over. And it was. I walked back up the aisle toward the doors I'd entered through, the weight of 4 years finally lifting from my shoulders. Behind me, voices burst into arguments. Someone knocked over a chair. Reporters began moving forward. But I didn't stop. I didn't need to shout anymore. The truth had already exploded. Outside, I stepped into the light. The cold air hit my skin like baptism. Alive. Seen. Free. The church bells were still ringing as I walked away. Fitting, really. They had meant to toll for the dead. Instead, they rang for the reborn. Back at the hotel, I watched the videos flood in. My phone buzzed nonstop. News clips, social media reactions, comment threads like wildfire. The woman who crashed her own funeral. Stolen identity? Scientist returns from the dead to expose family fraud. Biotech scandal erupts. The resurrection of Camille Rivera. It was surreal, watching the world rediscover me. But it wasn't about going viral. It was about being real again. 2 weeks later, I stood in my lawyer's office, watching as he slid a crisp sheet of paper across the table. Official revocation of death declaration. Signed, stamped, filed. I picked it up with both hands. The paper shook slightly, not from fear, but from something heavier, something older. The past, finally letting go of its grip on my throat. "You're officially alive again," he said, almost smiling. "I never wasn't," I replied. We submitted a formal complaint to the district attorney's office that same afternoon. Forgery. Fraudulent declaration. Identity theft. Misappropriation of assets. Patent theft. Tax evasion. Nolan's house of cards was collapsing. Fast. The investigation into Rivera Biotech was opened within days. Subpoenas were issued. Financial records pulled. Shareholders panicked. The board began asking questions they should have asked years ago. My parents hired lawyers. Nolan went silent. The golden boy had lost his shine. I didn't return to my old apartment in Austin. That chapter was burned, ashes scattered at the altar of their lies. Instead, I flew back to Barcelona, back to my quiet street with the flower shop on the corner, and the barista who remembered my name. But this time, I wasn't hiding. I stood taller, walked freer, laughed louder, and most importantly, I used my name again. Camille Rivera. Not a ghost, not a myth, not a memory. A woman who had been buried alive and chose to dig herself out. Some nights, I still dream of the church, of the portrait, of the silence just before the doors opened. But now, I don't wake up in terror. I wake up with fire. Because the worst thing they ever did wasn't killing me on paper. It was thinking I wouldn't fight back. Sometimes the only way to reclaim your life is to rise from the grave they dug for you. Not for revenge, but for freedom. They wrote my ending. But I rewrote the truth. I am not what they buried. I am what survived.